We think that meetup games are such a great idea. We're doing our first one at the Oaks Card Club, right back there, right here in the San Francisco, Oakland area. It's on Tuesday, January 7th. We're starting at 6 p.m., gonna go till whenever. We're playing 2-3 No Limit Hold'em. Tommy and I are gonna bounce around the tables playing as poorly as we can. We want you to come join us. So please go to leejones.com/contact and just leave a message saying, hey, you're interested, and we'll put you on the list. It's going to be a ton of fun, and we can't wait to see you there. There comes a point in a hand
I'm all in.
where you have to make an all or nothing decision.
I'm all in.
There's nothing that can keep my chips from...
I'm all in.
Stacks need to go in.
I'm all in. I'm all in. I'm all in.
You're going to see the river on this hand. That's pot commitment. That doesn't mean all your chips are going to go in. But it does mean you are never folding this hand. I've got ace king and I flop top pair and a guy bets and I raise. At that moment, I have to know, am I committed if he shoves or not? That's what I mean by pot commitment. Is the stack big enough? Are the effective stacks big enough to get the information you need to fold if you're beat? Let's say you've got pocket aces and before the flop, $100 goes in between you and the villain and you've only got 200 left. Okay. So in that situation, no matter what comes on the flop, no matter what happens, there's no way that you wouldn't be willing to put all your money in. You're not going to not see the river on this hand. That's pot commitment. You are committed to the end of this pot. That's because you only had 200, because no matter how the betting goes, you're never going to be sure enough that your aces are beat to fold. Now, if the stacks are 1,000, different story.
Absolutely.
You might bet 100 on the flop, he calls, the second card pairs, and it makes a flush. It's like the worst possible thing. And now you bet 200. And well, now you have enough information to determine, okay, aces, this is bet. So a lot of times pot commitment can depend totally on, are the stacks, when you have a good hand, when you flopped a good hand, are the stacks deep enough for you to ever get enough information to fold? And if the stacks are not deep enough, then, this is the beautiful part, you are committed. Now it doesn't mean all your chips are going to go in, but it does mean you are never folding this hand.
And that's an important point. That says that you may not choose to put the chips in yourself, but if the other guy wants to put them in, you're going to have to call them off. You can't get the level of certainty that you're beaten to make it correct to fold for your remaining chips. And when that happens, like let's say there's 100 in the pot, you bet 70 and you have 100 behind. If somebody raises, it's almost never a bluff.
Great point, because they see you're pot committed.
Because they see
they don't expect you to fold. That's huge. There's some fairly advanced subtle reads that are available here. You know, it could be where if it were normal size stacks and you bet the 70, the guy wouldn't necessarily raise with his set. He might be going to trap you. But because he sees you're pot committed, he thinks you're pot committed, he goes ahead and raises. But now because you know that he knows you were pot committed, you do it like you just said, and you put him on a much better hand. But it's all correct.
It's really fake pot commitment at this point.
Exactly.
It's pseudo pot commitment.
Yeah, you could do a fake pot commitment on purpose in those situations. That's a really good strategy because you're going to get good reads on people. I think the really important thing is to recognize when your opponents are pot committed and adjusting the betting accordingly. And I think the most important time that is when it comes to the decision to bluff or not. So let's say you have a nut flush draw and there's 100 in the pot and the first person bets out 70. And they only have 100 more. They only have 100 more, This is a case where raising with the draw would be a terrible, terrible mistake in my opinion, because you have zero fold equity. That's really the crux of this, is when you know the other people are pot committed, you have no fold equity. And so you shouldn't bluff, ever, right? But if the stacks had been, say, 1,500 each, this could be a good place to raise because maybe the guy will fold.
Right.
Maybe he'll just call and give you the free card. All kinds of wonderful things can happen. But when you know you have no fold equity because they are pot committed, that's when knowing when they're pot committed is really profitable.
I think one of the important things that we take away from that example is pot commitment awareness. That you realize that when you bet 70 into 100 with 100 behind you,
Right.
you should know
Yes.
exactly whether you are either pot committed or that's last money in the pot.
Absolutely.
There are two opposing terms. One is pot commitment and the other is last money in the pot. I'm putting this money in and that's it.
Yeah.
And at no other point am I going to put any further money into this
Right.
pot.
A good example of when you put the last money in your pot is like, let's say you have a 7-deuce offsuit in the big blind, you got a free play. The flop is king 4-4 rainbow, and it's just three-handed to this dinky little pot, and you fire out a bluff.
Right.
You know at that point that if somebody calls,
Right.
there's no card can even come on the turn. In fact, when I do this, it's kind of fun. I've done this a number of times. I bet they call and I muck. I don't even wait for the next card to come. That blows the dealer's minds too, because especially if the dealer's looking over here and they come back over here, they think there's a hand going on.
Right. But there's not.
And it's already over. Right. But that is a pretty good example of what we mean by last money in the pot.
Right.
It's like, there can be other situations where you actually have a hand. You bet your top pair on the turn and the flush card, straight card comes on the river. But because you watched our first video about value betting the turn, you're like, well, I'm just going to bet again. And if the guy raises me, I'm going to fold.
Right.
Very simple.
I see new players, inexperienced players, just kind of constantly calling off bets.
Yeah.
Without really paying attention to what that's doing to their stack. It's like, oh, it's 25 to you. Oh, okay, well, I have 25. I call.
Right.
But you need to make these decisions as the hand progresses relatively early, going, okay, either I need to stop putting money in the pot or I need to...
I think the most usable things we came up with was if you think the opponents are stack committed or pot committed, don't bluff.
Right.
That's number one.
I would say that number two is always be aware of where your own pot commitment is coming. And there's a line.
I dare you to step over this line. Okay, I'm a steppin'.
And one side of it is last money in the pot. The other side of the line is pot commitment.
Right.
Know where that line is and plan accordingly.
Thank you for watching. We are so grateful and we're so happy with how this project is going. We're just beside ourselves.
We really are, and we just so appreciate everybody that subscribes, that likes, that drops a comment, any of that stuff. But even if you don't do any of those things, if you just watch, we appreciate it and we're glad you're here.
I'm all in.